I've always been the black sheep of my family. Not because I'm a troublemaker or anything dramatic like that, but because I chose a different path than what my parents expected. While my siblings all followed traditional routes, my brother became a lawyer like my dad wanted, my sister became a teacher like my mom suggested. I decided to go into business. I started my own company right out of college instead of getting a safe corporate job. And let's just say my family wasn't exactly supportive of my entrepreneurial dreams. They saw it as me being irresponsible and unrealistic, constantly making comments about when I was going to get a real job and stop playing around with my little business venture. My company started small. I was working out of my garage, handling everything myself, barely making ends meet for the first 2 years. My family loved to remind me of this constantly. Every family gathering was filled with passive-aggressive comments about my finances, my future, my lack of stability. My dad would make jokes about me still playing entrepreneur while my siblings were building their careers. My mom would sigh dramatically whenever anyone asked about my work and change the subject as quickly as possible. My sister Sarah, who's 26, was particularly brutal. She'd make comments about how I was embarrassing, the family with my failed business attempts, and how I needed to grow up and face reality. The thing is, my business wasn't failing. It was actually growing steadily, but I kept that information to myself because, honestly, I was tired of their negativity, and I figured they didn't deserve to know about my success after years of putting me down. I was building something real, hiring employees, expanding my client base, but to them, I was still the irresponsible daughter who couldn't get her life together. This dynamic continued for years, with me quietly building my empire while they continued to treat me like the family disappointment. Fast forward to about 6 months ago, and my business had grown significantly. I'm talking serious growth. Multiple offices, over 50 employees, contracts with major corporations, the whole 9 yards. I was making more money than my lawyer brother and teacher sister combined, but I still hadn't told my family. Why? Because honestly, I was enjoying watching them make fools of themselves with their constant condescension. Every family dinner, where they'd make jokes about my cute little business, just made me more determined to keep my success a secret until the perfect moment presented itself. That perfect moment came in the form of my mother's 55th birthday party planning. My mom decided she wanted a big celebration, and my dad put my sister Sarah in charge of organizing everything. Sarah took this responsibility and ran with it, appointing herself as the family event coordinator and making it clear that she was in control of every detail. She created group chats, sent out elaborate planning emails, assigned everyone specific tasks, the whole production. At first, I was included in all of this planning, contributing ideas and offering to help with expenses. But then Sarah started making comments about my financial situation again. During one of our planning calls, she made a snide remark about how some of us could afford to contribute more than others, clearly referring to me. She suggested that maybe I should handle the decorations while the financially stable family members handled the bigger expenses like the venue and catering. I bit my tongue and agreed, still not revealing that I could probably fund the entire party without batting an eye. Things escalated when Sarah's boyfriend Jake got involved in the planning. Jake is 29, works in marketing for a mid-sized company, and has always been polite enough at family gatherings. He seemed nice, if a bit quiet, and Sarah was head over heels for him. They'd been dating for about 8 months at this point, and she was clearly hoping he'd propose soon. Jake would sit quietly during family dinners while Sarah dominated conversations, usually about her teaching job or their relationship milestones. During one particularly heated family planning session, about a month before the party, Sarah made another comment about financial contributions. She said something like, "Well, we all know some people are struggling more than others, so we should adjust expectations accordingly." She was looking directly at me when she said this, and I could see Jake shift uncomfortably in his seat. That's when I made the mistake of finally speaking up. I said, "Actually, Sarah, I'm doing fine financially. Better than you might think." This was me trying to gently hint that maybe she should back off without revealing everything. But Sarah took this as a challenge. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Right, because your garage business is really taking off, isn't it?" The whole family started chuckling, including my parents. Jake looked mortified, but he didn't say anything. That's when Sarah made the decision that would ultimately lead to her complete humiliation. She declared that maybe it would be better if I didn't attend the party at all. She said, and I quote, "Maybe it's better if you focus on getting your life together instead of pretending you can keep up with the rest of us. This party is for successful people who have their priorities straight, not people still playing make-believe with their careers." My parents, instead of defending me, actually agreed with her. My dad said something about how it might be less stressful for everyone if I didn't attend, and my mom said she understood that I might be too busy with my little projects anyway. My brother just sat there saying nothing, which was somehow worse than if he'd joined in. The message was clear. I was officially uninvited from my own mother's 55th birthday party because my family thought I was too much of a failure to deserve a seat at the table. I was hurt, obviously, but I was also seeing red. This was the final straw after years of condescension and dismissal. I decided right then and there that they were going to regret this decision in a big way. I told them I understood completely and that I hoped they had a wonderful party. I was so calm about it that I think it actually surprised them. They were probably expecting me to fight or beg to be included. Instead, I just smiled and said I'd send a nice gift for Mom. What they didn't know was that Jake worked for my company. Not just worked for my company, but worked directly under me. He was one of my marketing managers, and a good one too. He'd been with the company for about 6 months, which meant he'd started working for me right around the time he'd started dating Sarah. I hadn't made the connection immediately because Jake had never mentioned dating anyone from his personal life, at work, and Sarah had never mentioned Jake's last name or where he worked. It wasn't until I saw him at that family dinner that I realized my sister's boyfriend was my employee. The thing is, Jake had no idea I was Sarah's sister either. To him, I was just his boss, someone he respected professionally and who had been nothing but fair and supportive of his work. He knew his boss had family drama sometimes because I'd occasionally seem stressed after family events, but he had no idea he was dating into that drama. I'd kept my work life and family life completely separate, which meant neither side knew about the connection. I decided not to reveal this information right away. Instead, I started planning my revenge carefully. I knew the party was going to be at the fancy country club downtown, the same country club where I'd been networking for business purposes and had built relationships with the event management team. I also knew that Sarah had been bragging to Jake about how she was organizing this amazing party and how her family was full of successful, important people. She'd painted me as the family disappointment who couldn't get her life together. The week before the party, I had a casual conversation with Jake at work. I mentioned that I had some family stuff going on that weekend and might need to leave early on Friday to handle some personal matters. He was completely understanding and mentioned that he had a family event too, his girlfriend's mother's birthday party. He seemed excited about it and mentioned that it was going to be at the country club and how his girlfriend had planned this elaborate celebration for her successful family. I asked a few casual questions about his girlfriend and her family, and he told me all about Sarah's teaching career, my brother's law practice, and my parents' professional backgrounds. When I asked if his girlfriend had any siblings, he mentioned that there was a sister who hadn't quite figured things out yet, and who wouldn't be attending the party because she was going through some financial difficulties. He said this with genuine sympathy, which made me realize that Sarah had really painted me as a tragic figure, rather than just an irresponsible one. That's when I decided to make my move. I told Jake that I'd actually be attending an event at the same country club that night, a business networking event that I was hosting for my company's clients and partners. This was true. I'd arranged for our quarterly client appreciation event to be held at the country club the same night as the party, in the room right next to where my family would be celebrating. I'd moved mountains to make this scheduling work, calling in favors with the venue management and adjusting several client schedules. Jake seemed surprised that I'd be at such a fancy venue, and I could see him trying to reconcile this information with what Sarah had told him about me. I just smiled and said that sometimes business requires you to step up your game, even when you're still building your company. I could see the wheels turning in his head, but he didn't ask any direct questions. The night of the party arrived, and I showed up at the country club looking absolutely stunning. I'd bought a designer dress that cost more than Sarah made in a month, gotten my hair and makeup done professionally, and arrived in a car that definitely didn't scream financial struggles. I was there for my legitimate business event, which was in full swing with about 40 of my clients and business partners in attendance. My networking event was going perfectly. I was in my element, discussing business deals, making connections, and generally being the successful entrepreneur that my family refused to acknowledge I'd become. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was literally in the next room from my family's party, being celebrated by people who actually respected my achievements, while my own family was celebrating without me because they thought I wasn't successful enough to deserve a seat at their table. About an hour into both events, I noticed some familiar faces from my family starting to peek into our room. The country club had large glass doors between the two event spaces, and I could see my relatives doing double takes as they tried to figure out if they were seeing things correctly. My cousin spotted me first and immediately went to get my brother, who then stared at me through the glass like he was seeing a ghost. I pretended not to notice them and continued hosting my event like the professional I am. I was giving a short speech to thank my clients for their continued business when I noticed Jake had appeared in the doorway between the two rooms. The look on his face was priceless, complete confusion mixed with dawning realization. He was clearly trying to process why his boss was at the same venue as his girlfriend's family party, looking like $1 million and commanding a room full of business professionals. That's when Sarah appeared behind Jake, having come looking for him when he disappeared from their party. I watched through the glass as she followed his gaze and saw me standing at the front of the room, microphone in hand, dressed to kill and clearly running the show. Her face went through about 5 different expressions in the span of 10 seconds: confusion, recognition, shock, and then something that looked like panic. I finished my speech and started mingling with my clients again, still pretending I hadn't noticed my family's growing audience. More and more relatives started gathering at the glass doors, trying to figure out what was happening. I could see them pointing and whispering, clearly confused about how the family disappointment had ended, up hosting what was obviously a high-end business event. That's when Jake made the connection. I saw him pull out his phone, and I knew he was probably looking up information about my company, trying to piece together what he was seeing. Within minutes, his face had gone completely pale. He'd obviously figured out that his boss and his girlfriend's failure sister were the same person. The moment I'd been waiting for came when Jake walked back into the family party and I saw him approach Sarah. Even through the glass, I could see that they were having an intense conversation. Sarah kept shaking her head like she couldn't believe what he was telling her. Then I saw Jake point toward my event room, and Sarah's face just crumpled. What happened next was the most beautiful moment of vindication I've ever experienced. Sarah, followed by my parents and brother, came marching into my business event like they owned the place. Sarah was clearly upset and demanded to know what I was doing there. I calmly explained that I was hosting a client appreciation event for my company and asked what they were doing interrupting my business function. That's when my dad, clearly flustered, asked what company I was talking about. I smiled and gestured around the room, explaining that this was a quarterly event I hosted for the clients and partners of my business. I introduced them to a few of my clients, including the CEO of a major corporation that they would definitely recognize, and watched as their faces changed from confusion to shock to something approaching horror. But the real climax came when Jake, still looking shell-shocked, said the words that I will treasure forever. "Sarah, she's my boss." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Sarah's face went through every possible expression before settling on complete mortification. My parents just stood there with their mouths open, and my brother looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. That's when everything came tumbling out. Jake, bless his heart, was so uncomfortable with the situation that he started explaining everything to Sarah right there in front of everyone. He told her that he'd been working for my company for 6 months, that I was not only his boss, but one of the most respected people he'd ever worked for, and that my company was actually a major player in our industry. He mentioned some of the high-profile clients and contracts we'd secured, deals that even my lawyer father would be impressed by. Sarah tried to interrupt him, tried to make excuses, but Jake was on a roll. He said he couldn't understand why she'd told him I was struggling financially when I was clearly successful enough to employ him and dozens of other people. He mentioned that I'd been nothing but professional and supportive as his boss, and that he was confused about why the family treated me like I was some kind of failure. The best part was watching my parents' faces as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. My mother actually started crying, not because she was happy for my success, but because she was realizing how badly they'd screwed up. My father just kept shaking his head and muttering about how he didn't understand how this was possible. But Sarah's reaction was the most satisfying of all. She went from trying to make excuses to getting angry, demanding to know why I'd never told them about my success. I calmly explained that I'd tried to tell them several times, but they'd always dismissed my business as a hobby or a phase. I reminded her of all the times they'd made jokes about my little garage business and how they'd made it clear that they thought I was an embarrassment to the family. That's when I delivered the final blow. I told them that I'd kept my success private because their constant negativity and lack of support had shown me that they didn't deserve to share in my achievements. I explained that I'd wanted to see how long they'd continue to treat me like a failure before realizing they were wrong, and that they'd just answered that question by banning me from my own mother's birthday party. The room was completely silent, except for the background noise of my business event continuing in the background. My clients and partners were politely pretending not to notice the family drama unfolding, but I could tell they were all taking mental notes for future gossip sessions. Sarah tried to salvage the situation by suggesting that we could all celebrate together now that everything was out in the open, but I shut that down immediately. I told them that they'd made their choice when they decided I wasn't successful enough to deserve a seat at their table, and that I wasn't interested in being included now that they'd realized their mistake. Jake was still standing there looking, mortified, clearly realizing that his girlfriend had basically trash-talked his boss to his face without knowing it. I could see him trying to figure out how to handle the situation professionally, so I decided to make it easier for him. I told him that what happened in our personal lives wouldn't affect our professional relationship, and that he was still a valued employee regardless of his connection to my family. This seemed to make Sarah even more upset because she realized that I was being more mature and professional about the situation than she was. She started getting defensive, claiming that they'd only excluded me because they thought I was going through financial difficulties and didn't want to make me uncomfortable. I just laughed and said that if they'd actually cared about my comfort, they might have asked me directly instead of making assumptions and excluding me from my own mother's birthday party. My parents tried to intervene at this point, with my mother tearfully apologizing and my father trying to make excuses about misunderstandings and miscommunication. But I was done listening to their excuses. I told them that their actions had shown me exactly how they really felt about me, and that no amount of apologizing could undo the years of condescension and dismissal I'd endured from them. The final twist came when Jake, who was still processing everything, mentioned that he'd been planning to ask Sarah to marry him after the party. He said he'd even asked for my father's blessing earlier that week, but that now he needed to seriously reconsider their relationship. He said he couldn't be with someone who would treat family members the way Sarah had treated me, especially when that family member was someone he respected professionally. Sarah completely lost it at this point, screaming at Jake that he couldn't choose his boss over his girlfriend and demanding that he make a choice between his job and their relationship. Jake, to his credit, just looked at her sadly and said that she was proving his point about her character. He said he'd never seen this side of her before, and that he was beginning to understand why I'd kept my professional life separate from my family life. The party officially fell apart after that. My parents were too embarrassed to continue celebrating, my brother was trying to play peacemaker but failing miserably, and Sarah was having what could only be described as a complete meltdown. Meanwhile, my business event was still going strong. In the next room, full of people who actually respected and valued my contributions, I decided to make my exit before things got any messier. I told my family that I hoped they'd learn something from this experience, and that maybe next time they'd think twice before judging someone based on their own limited understanding of the situation. I said goodbye to Jake, assured him again that this wouldn't affect his job, and went back to my business event to continue networking and celebrating with people who actually appreciated my success. The aftermath has been absolutely glorious. Jake broke up with Sarah the next week, citing fundamental differences in values and character. He's continued to be an excellent employee, and we've never mentioned the family drama at work. Sarah has been calling and texting me nonstop, alternating between apologizing and trying to blame me for ruining her relationship. My parents have been trying to make amends, suddenly very interested in my business and wanting to be involved in my success now that they can't deny it anymore. But the best part is that word has spread through our extended family and social circle about what happened. Everyone now knows that the family failure is actually more successful than any of them, and that my own family treated me so badly that they excluded me from a family event because they thought I wasn't good enough to attend. The story has taken on a life of its own, with relatives calling to congratulate me on my success and express their shock at how my immediate family treated me. My business has actually benefited from all the attention, with several new clients reaching out after hearing about the company through the family gossip network. It turns out that being known as the entrepreneur who succeeded despite her family's lack of support is actually great for business, especially in circles where people appreciate a good underdog story. Sarah's reputation, on the other hand, has taken a significant hit. People are talking about how she treated her own sister and how she lost her boyfriend because of her own cruelty and arrogance. She's had to deal with questions about why she would exclude her successful sister from family events, and she doesn't have any good answers because there really aren't any. As for my parents, they're trying to rebuild their relationship with me. But the damage is done. They've realized that they not only missed out on celebrating my success, but that their behavior actually damaged their own family relationships and social standing. They're having to explain to people why they treated their successful daughter like a failure, and those conversations aren't going well for them. The most satisfying part of all of this is that it wasn't even really revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't have to plot or scheme or do anything vindictive. I just had to let their own actions and assumptions play out naturally while I continued being successful despite their lack of support. They created their own downfall by choosing to judge and exclude rather than support and include. Looking back, I realized that this whole situation was actually a blessing in disguise. It showed me exactly where I stand with my family, and it gave me the clarity I needed to set appropriate boundaries going forward. I no longer feel obligated to include them in my successes or seek their approval for my choices. I've built my own life and my own support system, and I don't need their validation to know that I'm successful. The story has become legendary in our social circle, and I've had several people tell me that they admire how I handled the situation with grace and professionalism even when my family didn't deserve it. It's also become a cautionary tale about making assumptions about people and treating family members badly based on those assumptions. In the end, my family got exactly what they deserved: the consequences of their own actions and attitudes. They chose to exclude me based on their incorrect assumptions about my success, and they ended up excluding themselves from sharing in that success. They prioritized their own sense of superiority over family relationships, and they lost both their sense of superiority and damaged their family relationships in the process. The best revenge really is living well, and I'm living very well indeed. My business continues to grow. I have the respect of my peers and clients, and I've learned to surround myself with people who value and support me rather than people who tear me down. As for my family, they'll have to live with the knowledge that they chose their own egos over their relationship with me, and that their actions revealed their true character to everyone who matters. Sometimes the universe delivers justice more perfectly than any revenge plot could, and this was definitely one of those times. My family banned me from the party because they thought I wasn't successful enough to deserve to be there, and in doing so, they revealed to everyone exactly how wrong they were and how badly they treated me. The truth came out in the most dramatic and public way possible, and now they have to live with the consequences of their choices. And Jake? He's still working for me, doing excellent work, and we've never discussed the family drama again. He made the right choice in ending things with Sarah, and I respect him even more as an employee for having the integrity to recognize that her behavior was unacceptable. Sometimes the best employees are the ones who understand that character matters more than personal relationships, and Jake definitely proved that. The whole experience has taught me that you don't need to seek revenge when people reveal their true character. Sometimes you just need to let them do it themselves and make sure you're in a position to benefit when the truth comes out. My family thought they were punishing me by excluding me from their celebration, but they actually gave me the perfect opportunity to show everyone exactly how successful I'd become despite their lack of support.